Hi all and welcome. Last lesson we looked briefly at the location of Rio, also why it was an important city, and also the challenges and opportunities caused by the urban growth in Rio. Um, in today's lesson, we're going to have a closer look at the challenges because we only touched on them in brief last lesson. And so what I want you to do is put the title Rio Challenges. Um, Key outcomes today is to understand about the challenges facing people in Rio and to assess how great these challenges are. So let's start off by just having a little recap of the last lesson. So quick quiz, I want you to write down your answers. You can pause the video here before I go through the answers. So question 1, describe the location of Rio de Janeiro. Question 2, gives 3 reasons why Rio is important. It could be described, this is why it could be described as a world city, so it's got global importance. Question 3, give 2 challenges caused by urban growth at Rio. And question 4, give 2 opportunities caused by the urban growth at Rio. So pause the video now before going through the answers. So here are the answers. Hopefully you've got these correct. If not, you can jot down the correct answers. So describe the location of Rio. So Rio de Janeiro is a major city on the southeast coast of Brazil in South America. It's a major port on the Atlantic Ocean. Question 2, give 3 reasons why Rio is important. So you could pick out any of these. Okay, so it's cultural capital of Brazil. Remember, it's not the actual capital. Brasilia is the actual capital, but it's kind of almost seen as the capital. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, so it's protected. Host of the 2016 Olympics and 2014 World Cup. Many manufacturing industries, so chemicals and furniture. So it's important for creating jobs. Also, it's drawn lots of people from different countries to migrate there to find work. The Christ the Redeemer statue is one of the 7 New World Wonders of the New World Wonders. A major port for trading, service industry, e.g., banking and finance, and important international transport hub. Answers to question 3 and 4. So 3, give 2 challenges caused by the urban growth at Rio. So you could have any 2 of these. So key things include, like you could have referred to, education. Only half of children continue in their education beyond the age of 14. You could have talked about lack of water. 12% of Rio's population had no running water. Could have talked about powerful gangs controlling the favelas. Many poor families illegally tap into things like electricity and also water. Unemployment rates you could have talked about as high as 20% in favelas, and a lot of people working in informal jobs where they could be like things like shoe shining, and also but also just whatever. So it could be selling a few things on the side of the street in a little stall, but none of it is correctly recognised by the government. They don't pay taxes and so on. Unemployment rates, so just mention that one. The huge variation in the access to healthcare in different areas of Rio. So life expectancy is 48 in Machina and 80 in Barra. Question 4, give 2 opportunities caused by urban growth. Rio, again, you could have had any 2 of these. On the last 2, there's more things you could have said, but I've just picked out a few. So by 2014, 95% of the population had mains water, so they were improving on that. In 2013, they brought in the pacifying police units. Basically, they were brought in to fight the drug dealing gangs and try and take back over the control of favelas. Medical care is generally better than in poorer areas and continues to improve. Rio attracts lots of big companies which help reduce unemployment. Rio provides 6% of Brazil's employment and also a lot of their wealth. A private university has been opened in Machina, in Rio's largest favela, so they're aiming to educate people, better education. There are lots more other things you could have said, but I've just picked out a few. So we're now going to have a closer look at the challenges in Rio. I'm going to pass. I want you to watch the next slides, which have been narrated by Miss Pollard during the last lockdown. She did a wonderful job of it. So enjoy that. And there's some tasks at the end.
So what would be good is if you pause the presentation right now and just study this table of information and think about it for a few minutes. Okay, so now you've thought about it, let's have a little look. In 2013, only 55% of the city had a local family health clinic. That's telling you that half of the city don't have access, or they don't have easy access to a clinic around the corner. So instantly we can start to see that there's problems here, because people would have to travel great distances in order to get help. And if they were poorly, that wouldn't be easy. If they were the elderly or vulnerable in other ways, if they were disabled, that's not easy. So therefore access is difficult. It also says that services for pregnant women and the elderly were very poor, especially in the West Zone. So we've got inequalities between the different areas, which can lead to resentment. Let's have a little look at the data. If we start with Rio de Janeiro as a whole, we've got, for infant mortality rate, remember that's the number of babies that die before their 5th birthday, we've got 19 out of 1,000. We've got 74% of pregnant females getting care, and we've got an average life expectancy of 63, which in comparison to Britain would be low. We would have a much lower infant mortality rate of like 4 or 5 out of 1,000. In fact, it might even be lower. We'd have 100% of pregnant women getting care, and we've got a life expectancy of more like 83. So, that gives you an idea of where Rio is. Then when we look at the different zones, we've got the South Zone, which is probably very similar to Britain. The South Zone, to remind you, is our wealthy area where we've got a low infant mortality rate, we've got all women getting medical treatment, and we've got a high life expectancy. And then when you compare that to Cidade de Dios in the West Zone, which we already know is fairly poor, we've got an infant mortality rate of 21 out of 1,000. That's a huge disparity between the West and the South. And that's telling you that these people are not getting care in the early years of life. It correlates directly with the pregnant females, which is only 60%. That means 40% of pregnant women are not having any kind of checkup or health care for their pregnancy throughout the entire pregnancy. They might even be giving birth on their own at home. And because of that, deaths happen, accidents happen. And if the baby in those first few weeks gets poorly or sick, which is quite likely when you're living in a very poor area, they're not getting treatment. And it's because of that high infant mortality rate that means that the average life expectancy is low. That's why the life expectancy here is 45. It's almost half that of Barra de Tijuca. And that's not to say that people don't live till an older age. It's because of the infant mortality rate being so high that the average life expectancy has been brought down so low. So there's huge differences here. The other thing is that the infant mortality rate being 21 out of 1,000 is 3 or 4 times higher than Barra de Tijuca in the south. So it's a huge inequality which can lead to conflicts and resentment, discrimination. So this is a really big challenge for the authority to sort out, because the numbers are so high. They're not small numbers, they're high numbers, so they have a big task on their hands. Let's look at education. Again, pause the presentation now and just study this information and have a think about it. Okay, let's go. So the challenges. Education in Brazil is compulsory for children aged 6 to 14. So that's primary school age up until year 9. And it's also starting at 6 as opposed to us, which starts at 4. In Rio, only half of all children continue their education beyond the age of 14. So we've got a massive dropout rate, and it tells you here that many drop out of school and get involved in things like drug trafficking, and the level of school enrolment is low. Now let's just go back to the compulsory education. Just because something is compulsory doesn't mean that children won't go. And some of these children will not be going to school, even though they should be by law, because there are bigger pressures in the family home. If they are poverty stricken, their parents may need them to actually go out and try and earn some money. in the informal sector, so shining shoes or braiding people's hair on the beach or something like that, to just try and earn a few pence each day. So although the school is compulsory and they should be going, they might not be turning up. I imagine the attendance rates are very, very low. And you could say, oh, well, then the government could fine them like we do in Britain. But the thing is the government can't do that. The government's got too many problems, too many priorities that it's got to deal with, and chasing people up for not attending school is probably right at the bottom of their list. Therefore, it doesn't happen, and children then don't go to school. There are other reasons why the enrolment is low. So a shortage of schools, so there simply aren't enough school places. A lack of money and the need to work, we've already talked about. A shortage of teachers, and that will link into the fact that the training for teachers is poor and the pay is poor. So people are not necessarily wanting to follow careers in teaching because you're not getting much money for doing it. There's a shortage of them. There aren't enough schools. So, of course, it's a bit of a problem. They can't build the schools quick enough. So, therefore, education isn't going to be brilliant. And the challenges that come with that is generally low aspiration from people. If people have low aspiration and low qualifications, they generally can't break out of poverty. Education is the route out of poverty. And for these people, if they're not getting it, they're not going to break out of that poverty cycle. And that presents huge challenges for the country, especially as then those people are struggling to make ends meet, and they turn to things like drugs in order to try and make a living. They get involved in crime, they get involved in prostitution, all things that bring problems to the country, but they're struggling to sort it out, again, because the scale of the problem is so big. You know, you've got half the children not attending school. It's not like dealing with just one or two, it's 50%. That's a lot. Okay, pause the tape again and just have a little study of this in front of you, and then again listen. Okay, so the challenges here then. We've got 12% of Rio's population not having access to running water. Now that means mains water, like what we have here. We turn the tap and the water comes out. That is running water. What that's telling you is 1 in 10 people don't have access. That's a huge number. Even though the number sounds small, that's huge that 1 in 10 don't have access to running water. That means that they're getting their water from sources where it's not running. So, for instance, out of a river or a lake or a well or a borehole or a standpipe. They're getting water from those places. Now that presents challenges. It presents challenges for them because they can spend up to a quarter of their day going to get water. Water is heavy. So whilst they might want to be at school or they might want to be working in a job, they're actually having to spend time going to places to get water. And then, of course, the water they're getting isn't necessarily safe for them to drink. So then they get ill. It also says here that it's estimated that 37% of water is lost through leaky pipes, fraud and illegal access. Well, you could say, well, why don't they fix the leaky pipes? But how can you see a leaky pipe when it's underneath the ground? In Britain, we've got an awful lot of water being wasted through leaky pipes as well. But if you can't see it, it's very hard to deal with it. So that's an estimate. But it's a lot, nearly 40% of water being essentially wasted. Fraud and illegal access, that'll be people tapping into the water supply. Maybe even businesses and companies too. So it presents big challenges because it's hard to actually stop these problems. It's hard to find the problems in the first place. Then we've got a few quotes, and those quotes on the just around the photo there are saying that Rio also suffers with water shortages because the rains don't come, so it's prone to drought. So that adds to the challenge. So we've got a lot of difficulties here, and if people can't get water, which is a basic necessity, then they get ill. And if people get ill, they cannot be productive. And I've told you this before. If you can't be productive and you can't work, you can't earn. And that means that economies can't grow and can't thrive. Being healthy is one of the most important things in the world, isn't it? So having a bad water supply is not great. Again, pause the tape, look at the photo and have a read of the information. Right, let's look at the photo. That is showing you illegal electricity connections in a favela. Now that pipe there, with all those wires coming out of it, that has been done by the very poorest people living in the favelas that are tapping into an energy supply, probably from a lamppost, and they're doing it illegally. In a way, it's ingenious because obviously they are wanting energy. Everybody wants energy. You may have experienced a time when you've had a power cut at home or at school, and you know the disruption and the chaos it causes. People cannot be productive without electricity and without energy. They can't extend their day, especially the people of Rio, because it gets dark at 6 o'clock at night. So they can't then extend their day. They can't do social activities. They can't navigate the streets if there is no electricity. So it's a huge challenge. And because the poor dwellers are stealing the energy, the whole city suffers with blackouts all the time. So obviously that's very, very disruptive for Rio. The Olympics actually made the situation worse because there was a much bigger demand for energy from all the tourists coming in, and from powering the stadiums and so on and so forth. So energy is again a big problem that needs sorting out so that people can be productive, people can work, people can be safe.
So I hope you enjoyed Miss Pollard's narrations then. I think they were really in-depth and really good quality. So what I want you to do now is there's some tasks coming up. On Satchel 1, there should be some links to these two pages of the textbook that have been taken a photograph of. I've also put them here, but they're quite small to see. So you might be better off getting the actual link from Satchel 1, but I'll leave them here as well so that you are able to at least see them if you're struggling to open it. So here are the questions that I would like you to answer. Remember to use the textbook pages to help you answer this, but you should make sure that you answer these questions in full sentences. So pause the video now so that you don't go straight on to the answers. Also remember that if you've got any questions, we're waiting on Teams. So here are the answers. I will talk them through as well. So name two differences between the housing areas in Rio shown in photo A. So here's an answer for you. So the housing by the Copacabana beach in the south zone looks wealthy. There are well-constructed apartments and flats with balconies with sea views fronting the beach. The land here is flat and it looks like there is good infrastructure. In contrast, housing in the distance is sprawled up the steep hillside. It almost looks like housing has been built on top of each other. It would be steep and dangerous, and houses may fall if they are unstable. So notice how it's talked about both housing areas in detail and discuss what it looks like. So next question. So suggest problems with providing services in the favela in photo A. So getting services to the favela would be difficult because the houses are already there, and so putting in systems like water, roads, electricity, sanitation, drainage would be a challenge. Because the land has been built on. Also, it is steep, which means building is difficult. There are no roads, so getting equipment and diggers in would be difficult too. Also, the inhabitants that live in the favelas are not there legally. They do not pay tax, therefore funding the cost of the services would also be challenging. So the answer to question 2. So read the newspaper headlines and see and why were these difficult times for Rio. So because there was experienced drought, it was the worst in 80 years. The Buna and Santa Branca reservoirs were out of water, which meant they had to divert water from other rivers instead of them being used to generate electricity. This would have meant that there would be a shortage of energy and leading to blackouts. And if there's loss of light and electricity, then people aren't going to be able to work late in the evening. People won't be able to use their computers and so on. So it's going to have an economic impact in terms of jobs. The next question. Why do you think authorities were keen to improve the water supply in the West Zone? So there's a few reasons. One, this is a poor area of low-class housing where infant mortality is high. The average life expectancy is therefore low, and it's only 45. Therefore, in order to help reduce the deaths, it's important to get running water to people. Okay, and secondly, Olympic Park is here, which will draw in huge numbers of tourists, and it would be incredibly embarrassing for Brazil and for Rio if those tourists came and they weren't getting the the basic services such as running water, and it would impact negatively on people's views and perceptions of Rio and Brazil as well. And finally, so model answer to the practice question. So use a case study of a city in a LIC, so low income country, or NEE, so newly emerging economy, to suggest why managing social challenges may be difficult. So here's an answer for you. So urbanisation has been so rapid that the government has not been able to keep pace. This has led to problems on a variety of levels. All of these social problems link. For example, poor water supply leads to poor health. Poor health means children will miss school. The problem escalates. These challenges will lead to other social problems, such as people turning to crime or illegal ways of getting what they need, like stealing energy, turning to drug trafficking, using drugs to stave off hunger and make them feel momentarily better, and prostitution to earn. Similarly, without services, their waste build up further, so the waste will build up further, leading to disease. In turn, these crimes then lead to further problems such as resistance to the police and hatred towards the authorities. So note for this answer, that would get 6 marks. Note how the answer keeps developing the point, so keeps expanding. It doesn't just say something very brief. It says a point and then expands and develops the answer. And it points at several ideas. So it doesn't just cover one idea. So it points out several different ideas. So those are your answers there. Just make any improvements that you need to, and then there's one final task for you to do. So we've almost done for today, but what I want you to do now is go back to your teams. You should have it up all the time anyway, but go back to the teams and see if you can write an answer to any one of these questions in the Q&A section, and then your teacher can reply to you. So see if you can answer any of those questions in the Q&A. Remember, nobody else other than the teacher can see your answers, and the teacher might not necessarily read your name out if they think that you wouldn't like it.